You know, you're really missing out.
I'm lactose intolerant.
Ugh, more for me. More for me. All right. All right, everybody, welcome back. Welcome back to another episode of our video series here. Again, I'm Officer Wes.
And I'm Officer Brian.
So, again, you guys have had a couple of lessons under your belt now. And ultimately what we want to do is we want to build upon each one. And each time we're going to address a new topic and we're going to start throwing some new stuff at you guys. But all this coincides with everything we've talked about before. Now, today's a big one. Today's a big one that we're going to be discussing. We're out here, it's a beautiful day, we're enjoying one of the courtyards here at Madison, and we're going to talk about something that affects every single person on the planet. Something that no matter who you are, where you come from, how old you are, what you look like, it doesn't matter. It's something that if you don't recognize and get under control, it can actually cause you to kind of shut down completely. What do you think, Officer Brian? What do you think we're talking about today?
I think that sounds a lot like stress.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. Today's lesson and our topic, what we're going to be talking about today, is stress. And stress, guys, you got to remember, is any kind of force. It's not something that we can, see, but we feel it. And it greatly impacts us and affects the way our judgment is, our emotions, all these different things. When we're talking about stress, we're talking about any strain, pressure, excitement that you feel about a situation or an event. Could be something coming up, it could be something that you know you have to do in the future, but again, it's something that you feel, and it affects you in different ways.
So is that something like maybe a big test coming up, or a big game you're playing?
I agree.
Or like the nerves you get? Is that kind of what you're talking about?
Exactly right. So when you kind of hit the nail on the head there, Officer Brian, when you're talking about the nerves that you feel. So what do you think? What are some ways that, how do you think a person might feel when they're feeling stressed out?
Well, when I think of being stressed, it's just like the sweaty palms, the shakes. Maybe you might feel a little nauseous sometimes. I never really got that, thank God. Or also the tunnel vision, when it's very hard to focus on the entire environment and you're just primary focused on one thing. That's when I think of stress, that's really what I feel. So
does it ever make you feel different emotionally?
Well, yeah, I mean, your decision making, I think, is a little impaired. Sometimes you're overly worried. Again, the nervousness just kind of takes over you. And we're going to kind of talk about how to overcome those challenges, and to deal with the stress, because stress is in everyday life, okay? Just like we talked about risks before, stress is also there on a daily basis.
I'm really glad you mentioned nervousness, because it's important to remember that stress affects us both physically and emotionally, the way that we feel. Some people might get scared or just really upset and frustrated and angry, and that is a very common response to stress, as well as the kind of the physical signs like you were talking about. And it doesn't matter, everybody experiences that stress in a different way. So to kind of illustrate that point, we have some students here that were willing to kind of jump in and share with you how they feel when they're getting stressed out.
Whenever I feel stressed out, it makes me want to cry.
Their hands get sweaty, their head starts to pound, or their heart starts racing, and they get butterflies in their stomach.
When I feel stressed, it makes me want to scream.
I think they feel like angry or like sad or just sometimes nervous or like afraid of like maybe reaching out to someone.
Whenever I'm stressed out, I feel like I want to throw something.
Whenever I'm stressed out, I want to say something mean.
So that was a real good way for you guys to get an idea of how stress really does impact everybody differently. And I know that for me, when I'm feeling really stressed out, I know that maybe my heartbeat starts to go a little bit faster, maybe my palms get a little sweaty, or I get that little bead of sweat on my forehead, I'm doing one of these or something like that.
I'm pretty sure you always get that.
I'm always a little sweaty, but when I'm stressed out, it's even worse. And that's okay. But it's important to remember that we have to recognize that. When I know that's coming on, I begin to recognize it, and I can kind of manage it now and get a little bit better under control. But stress is not always a bad thing. If you remember back to our first lesson talking about risks and consequences, consequences and risks aren't always a bad thing. They can have positive outcomes. Well, the same thing with stress. Stress at times can also be a positive thing as well. What do you think, Officer Brian? How is stress positive to you?
Well, absolutely. I mean, Just think of a test, for example, or a big game, a basketball game, volleyball game, whatever it may be. You know, your body might be going through a lot of stress, but it's a good stress because maybe you want to perform up to your expectations. Maybe you've been studying for that test for over a week and you just really, really want to do well. You've been really looking forward to it. You can still, you know, have the feeling side of it, like the nervousness, you can't sleep at night, the tunnel vision. So there are good stresses and there's also negative stresses.
See, negative stress, or when we're exposed to stress for too long, can become an incredibly negative thing. Because now, imagine feeling everything that we've been talking about just for hours, days, weeks, months, whatever the case might be. That takes a toll on you, and it kind of wears you down. And then when that stress becomes too overwhelming and you can't control it, now all of a sudden it's going to dictate your actions, your motions, whatever the case might be. Maybe now you couldn't get that stress under control and you end up drawing a blank during a test, or you can't perform during a sports activity the way that you know you're capable of doing. That's when stress becomes negative, because we let it overwhelm us and control us. Now, the easiest way to be able to stop that is to have a good idea of what you can do in a stressful situation to kind of calm yourself down. So it's all about coming up with the strategy. It's about coming up with a way that works for you, that when you all of a sudden maybe feel that onset of nervousness, when you feel that stress beginning to set in, how are you going to get it under control? How are you going to keep it from controlling your actions and your decision making? We're going to discuss a few different ideas and some things that you can use, and stuff that Officer Brian and I use as police officers to control our stress levels. So, for instance, one of the ones that I really like is simply just taking a break. It could be just kind of closing your eyes for a minute at the desk if you're feeling stressed out about a problem, or if you're working on a homework assignment or a project at home and you're feeling really stressed out, just get up, take a break for a few minutes, and then come back and look at it with a fresh point of view and a fresh perspective. What other techniques do you recommend, Officer Brian?
Well, the one I like to use the most really is just the breathing technique. I actually learned it in the academy, and it's the box breathing, or the 4 seconds and 4 seconds breathing. It's inhale for 4 seconds and exhale for 4 seconds. That really, you do that 2 to 3 times, and usually you can calm your body down enough to then think clearly and make a decision from that point on.
Oh, I remember that.
Yes.
I remember that. It actually is like you're breathing around the sides of a box. In for 4 seconds and hold, exhale for 4 seconds, hold for 4 more before you start the process over again. That stuff works, man.
It does. It does.
What other techniques do you recommend?
One of my favorites actually is then exercise, swimming, running. Swimming, obviously, always with someone. Running, go for a run around the track. Lift weights if you want to, but my favorite really is just going for a run. Run as far away from your house as possible and come back in. That's the best exercise you could get, because there's only one way to get back. So I have a pretty big loop around my house, and that's the way I deal with stress, is just go for a run, and you're always going to come back with that runner's high, they call it, and your body feels great. You just got a lot of good exercise. Your legs, your chest, you feel good.
So do you feel completely relaxed compared to when you were stressed?
Absolutely. I mean, during the run too, you could always think about what's bothering you and ways to overcome it as well, because your body's working on something else. It's working on the run, but then your mind is also thinking of, well, you know what, how can I overcome these stressors that are interfering with my life at the time?
I like that idea. I have one other one that's a real big favorite of mine, and that's the positive pep talk. This is where you have to be your own cheerleader. You have to be your own advocate, and you have to be the one to tell yourself, I can do this. If you sit there and tell yourself, no matter what that obstacle is or what that hurdle is, that, you know what, I got this, I know it's hard, but I can do this, I can overcome this, I believe in myself, that's a really powerful tool. Sit there and do it in your head, or do it out loud. People might give you a little funny look, but you know what? It helps. I do it to myself all the time. Like, I got this, I can do this, I believe in myself. That's a simple, very fast tool that you guys can use to handle a stressful situation and kind of retake control. So these are some really simple techniques that we hope you guys start using, because in all honesty, The earlier on in your life that you can recognize and handle stress, the more you're setting yourself up for success in the long haul. I mean, Officer Brian and I, we have stuff that stresses us out in our daily lives every day. It's probably a little bit different than the stuff that stresses you guys out, but stress is something that you're going to be dealing with because we all do. In some way, shape, or form, everyone deals with stress. The problem is that a lot of times when people are feeling stressed, they turn to substances like drugs and alcohol because they think it's going to help them. They think it's going to make that stress disappear.
How do they think that? Like, why would they think that the drug is going to help them at that point?
Well, that's actually a very excellent question, Officer Brian. I think a lot of times people think it's really changing and making that stress disappear. But in all actuality, that drug, remember, any substance other than food that affects the way our minds and body work, is really changing the way the chemicals in our brain and in our bodies are working. They're releasing feel-good chemicals to mask whatever's going on under the surface. And the problem is that those problems, whatever was stressing you out, is still there. It's just hidden now by whatever that drug, whatever that compound is that you introduce into your body. When that stuff wears off, that initial stress is still going to be there, and you still have to figure out a way to deal with it. But if you keep turning to a substance like a drug, well, now you're introducing more added levels of stress, and you're making the situation worse for yourself. I wish I told you, I wish I could stand here today and tell you guys I had a magic cure for stress to make it completely disappear so we never feel it. But it doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. It's something that we got to work through.
So, Officer West, what you're really saying is you don't want to keep using a drug or substance to mask what you're feeling rather than just maybe dealing with it. And it might feel challenging at the time, but you should just deal with what's bothering you and get over it from there, right?
I agree. The faster you can do that and the faster you can find a way for you to cope with and deal with and handle the things in your life that give you stress, the faster you're going to be able to overcome them and really become that young, successful, and most importantly, responsible individual that we're hoping you all become. And that's kind of the main thing of why we're doing this series for you guys. So guys, that's a whole lot about stress, something that's all around us that we have to be able to recognize and deal with every day. We hope you guys enjoyed this and hope you got something to take away from it. But more importantly, we have some more conversation kickoffs so that hopefully you can continue this conversation with the grown-ups in your lives. Because that's one of the main points here, is making sure you have those conversations at home as well as at school or with people like me and Officer Brian. So, we're going to have our students introducing our conversation kickoffs. Until we see you guys next time, thank you all. Be safe, be responsible, and we'll see you on the next one.
Talk about a time that you've been stressed. How did you handle it?
What are the things in your life that cause stress?
What are some positive ways that you can deal with the stress in your life?